Hey folks, welcome back to HVAC Talk with Huff. I'm Huff. I'm still the same guy. I'm excited because last week I actually got to spend some time via Zoom with the one and only Mr. Brian Feenie. To say that Brian Feenie does one thing would be to totally miss the mark of who he is. He wears a lot of hats. He does a lot of training. He does training for MeasureQuick, training for ACA's quality QI program, and he also he helps contractors. He helps distributors. I mean, he does so much, and so there's no way you can really define what he does, other than the fact that he does a lot of things and he does them very well. But not only we talk about what his current roles are, but I like to get down to understanding how did you get to where you are. I mean, what was your path in this business? A lot of people are interested in that, especially young technicians. They look up and they aspire to some of these folks, these giants in the industry like Brian, and they're like, Brian, how did you get to be Brian? And so we are excited that we got to sit down and talk together, and we got to talk about his journey in HVAC, how he ended up where he is, and things that he's excited about. And also, the last thing we did was we talked about, what does the industry still need to do? How can we get better? How can we overcome the shortage of technicians? How can we do better at training technicians? And so I really got to pick his brain as far as what do you think that we need to do? And he provided some great insight. So very excited about this conversation I got to have with Brian. It was my first time meeting him, even though several people told me, you need to meet this guy. We have a lot of similarities in our background, even a lot of some of the things that we're doing today. And so it was a great, great conversation. And I feel like I gained a friend and gained even a mentor out of my discussion with Brian. So I'm excited to share that with you. So hope you enjoy my time with Brian and gain insight from our conversation. Thank you. So we're excited today to be here with the Brian Feenie that I've never met, but everybody's told me I need to meet. And of course, I see you, on social media, and I see some of the things that you're doing. But it's like, who is Brian? So that's like my very first thing was I had written on my notes is the question is, who is Brian? And how did you get started in HVAC? And just tell us about the path that kind of led you to where you are today.
Ooh, well, Huff, thanks for having me on. The origin story. I started in this industry back in 1994, working for Ferguson Enterprises as a management trainee. So, graduated Penn State with marketing degree. This industry was never on my radar. And so I was looking at a good opportunity out of college to have some type of career pathing. And I was always a motorhead. Like drag racing was always, you can see a picture of one of my cars behind me.
I was, yeah, I saw that.
To me, like starting I guess the early days of my career in wholesale, I started to relate cars to HVAC. So there was an interest there. I was, the branch I worked at had HVAC, plumbing, and industrial, and we sold everything. But what I started to find, and I did have someone take me under their wing and say, "Hey, you're going to be mine. You're going to be an HVAC guy." And I was like, "I don't know what that is, but let's go." So when I started to do my research and study and learn, an engine and a compressor, there's some similarities there, right? So I started to take it seriously, and I worked my way up. My first day on the job was working on the loading dock, driving a forklift and putting stock away, learning every part of our industry, even plumbing, by the fitting. And, I used to order Ream parts, so I started to understand what the parts were, and then worked my way up through Ferguson to outside sales. So kind of started my sales career on the wholesale side. And, eventually made some moves out to better my career, got onto the manufacturing side of our industry with Hart and Cooley. And, I've tried a lot of flavors of ice cream. So when you look at my profile, I've worked at a lot of different places, but I look at those as like the book of life on how to, foster a career. but finding the things that you like. And it's one thing to work one place forever, right? A lot of people enjoy that. I just never had this level of satisfaction internally to want to just do one thing. So I sought out different types of opportunities, different types of roles, and had to go out and, really just find myself, I guess you could say. And for years, I didn't really want to own the fact that HVAC was going to be my thing. And I guess it wasn't until about the early 2000s when I joined Lennox where I started to see how they were investing in their teams and, helping us be better at our jobs and how to bring value to contractors. Because I've always been touched, by what contractors do. Like, I care a lot about this industry as I look back 30 years. Linux really made it possible for me to come to terms with myself. Do I want to be an expert in this industry? So I decided to double down about, almost 20 years ago, how to take this industry seriously, how to be the best version of myself that I could be. And I'd always, been on the forefront of the IAQ push, right? Not the COVID push of IAQ, the actual push of IAQ.
Yes, the original wave, not the after wave.
Yes, not when everyone became geniuses and decided that they sold IAQ for a living in 2020, 2021. So I had always found this interest in the emerging parts of our businesses, whether it was IAQ, and then when smart thermostats and communicating equipment started to come about, I'm a gadget guy, and at 53 years old, I was around before the internet. I was around before cell phones. And so in that Gen X life, you have to adapt or not. And I chose to adapt and have, the best understanding I can of everything. And so I found my niche back when I joined White Rogers, starting to get into IoT products and smart home, and then spent some time at Service Titan, getting some SaaS experience. And then even in between all that, we built a sandwich, right, of where I am today to where I started and what's in the middle. Understanding the SaaS market, we're working with startup companies, working in wholesale distribution, working for manufacturers. Somewhere in there too, I was in the home service side. I've sold at the kitchen table, as comfort advisor.
Oh, wow.
And also ran an HVAC and plumbing company during all that time. And I've also, worked in the commercial industrial space. So a lot of different stops along the way. And then the HVAC symposium 2 years ago, I'd met Jim Bergman, obviously, when he rolled out Measure Quick. So we'd been kind of in close contact for years because we had an integration with an old Sensi Predict product that no longer exists. But Jim had called me when I was working for Google Nest. This is about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Love to figure out a way to work together." So at the time, I took it on as an opportunity for a side hustle. So I was working for Google Nest. I was helping Jim with Measure Quick, help grow sales, and work through some changes that we were looking to make there. And I was down at the HVAC symposium speaking for ACA and Measure Quick, and I lost my job at Google Nest while I was on vacation from my side hustle in Florida. Oh, shift logic happens. The Sunday plane ride home from Orlando over a year ago. And luckily at the time I had a relationship with ACCA and Measure Quick. So I was at least able to not completely freak out of how I was going to pay the bills and support my family. So as time went on, I started to take on some roles as an industry advisor for some software companies that were coming to the market, which I still keep those advisory roles today. Partnered with JB Industries back in June of last year. So I've been with them for about a year now. And my Shift Logic business is, crested over the year. I made it over the year. So I'm happier than I've ever been because I do what I love every day. And everything I do is hard. Like it's, trying to mold the minds of technicians and business owners and service managers and install managers every day to make them a little uncomfortable and do some things that they weren't ready for. Right. To me, that's exciting. I've always felt in other roles that I get bored very quickly, and boredom breeds complacency. And so, being self-employed and having the clients that I do, such as Measure Quick, ACCA, JB, Eden is another one that does online price quoting, Palmetto, which is leasing for our industry, which is really exciting for us right now. There's more, but I'm also a business coach. So to me, getting up every day and working on, I feel like I have 7 full-time jobs to serve the people I work with, and it's an opportunity to give back to the industry, right? I mean, I've put my hands on equipment and I've installed ductwork before, and some people will say, "Oh, have you really done it?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I've done it. I decided I didn't want to do that for a living." Right now, I teach people how to commission air conditioning systems and gas furnaces every day. I didn't think I would be doing that, but to me, there's we have a skilled labor gap. It's not a new thing. It's been happening for 30 years, right? It hasn't changed. It's not a current issue. It is what we have in our industry as a whole. It just is what it is. And there's no more unicorns the way I look at it. And that's why many companies have built their own training arms of their businesses, or they've partnered with other training organizations to help do that. I kind of fit into that middle ground to help facilitate training for Measure Quick, for ACCA, QI, quality install, helping technicians understand why they should invest in smart tools with JB. Those types of things are all where we're at today, right? Everyone's got phones in their pockets, mini computers. This is no different. Most industries adjacent to HVAC are already technologically advanced. Automotive, medical, teaching, the school system with smart boards. I mean, let's face it, we're so antiquated as an industry called HVAC that sometimes I meet a lot of people that just want to keep it the way it's always been 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and that's huge.
Yeah.
You're right.
So that's my kind of start, where I started to now, now is just, it's about having fun and pushing a big ass boulder up a mountain, with everyone next to me, trying to get it, inch by inch, to progress.
Yeah. So, all right. So I do got to tell you a few interesting things, but this interview is about you, not me. But I think you're going to find this a little funny, right? So my dad was a commercial sheet metal guy. So I started banging metal when I was a teenager on job sites, back when OSHA who, so I mean, you can never get away with what I got away with when I was, right. I'm actually 1 year younger than you. I'm 52. And so, but I started as a teenager, but my dad taught me how to draw fittings. He taught me how to measure stuff up. So I was literally a road foreman at 19 for an HVAC contractor out in Northern Virginia. But I knew I did not want to do duct work, right? So when you said that, like, I did not want to do that, it was like, I got the scars to prove it. And so the service guys had better vans. I had to, I live in a rural area, so we had ag mechanics in high school. So I learned a lot about electrical and all that. So I just needed to put the refrigeration circuit part together. And I started working with the service department on weekends. And next thing you know,
by the time I was, I don't know, 22, 23, I ended up being service manager it was a weird series of events, right? And so I just end up being thrust into that, right? Then I left there and went to work for Carrier. Uh, Back when it was actually Carrier UTC, then they sold their distribution arm because tech support was done at the distribution level. Then they sold it to Wasco and all merged had CE. Then I went to work for York, which was factory direct. So it was interesting. So I covered the Northeast, and you're teaching Johnstone, right? Or you're over Johnstone with York's sister product, and it was funny watching you do that because I know who those guys were, and suddenly his name escapes me, but he's such a great guy. It was the guy up there,
Dave Petz.
Dave Petz, yeah,
Yeah.
so he wants to do it right, and because he saw the same things we saw on the factory direct side, right? We all know this. We saw it at Carrier. We all go out as technical. I did OEM tech support for 17 years, and we kept on going out and seeing the same things that you saw when you was a contractor, when you was with Lennox, is that if the system was commissioned correctly, a lot of those problems would have never existed, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those problems were made because either the system was installed wrong, it was applied wrong, or it wasn't started correctly, And so you take all those things away, and we don't see the problems that we see. And of course, Jim Bergman, being who he was, saw that way in advance. I saw that in Jim when he was with Imperial, right? But so I want to get in that business coaching thing a little bit because I think that this is a part that's being left out of our industry, and I think you're filling a void that actually that I've been feeling. So I ended up leaving OEM world. I just couldn't take it anymore. Started my own business, and so I've got a couple side hustles. I'm telling you, our lives will line up. We need to have dinner one night. By the way, what part of the country are you in? By the way,
I'm outside of Philadelphia.
Outside of Philly, you're actually not that far away. So that's a good steak dinner away. We've got to figure this out. But so earlier today, the reason I had to shift us back a half hour, honestly, is because I forgot where I had to be tomorrow for a church thing. Because I'm also a pastor, right? So that all ties in. I have a lot of fun as well, 7 days a week. But I can tell you this: without 7 days a week, I'd get in trouble. I don't know about you, but you talk about, if you're not busy, you get complacent. I would just get in trouble. So I'm better off being busy. But I was with a contractor this morning, so I want to get your take on this, right?
Sure.
So I was with a contractor. I'd already showed him Measure Quick, and he's like, man, he wants to go all in, right? So we're trying to put a package together of what he wants to outfit all of his techs with the same tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I will, I pitched a certain brand that will, that you would love very much. So we're trying to put something together for him, and he wants to do it, but it's the pain of doing it, right? And then, of course, I was with some of his guys this morning, and we were talking about, some of the changes. Plus, he needs an inventory system. He has no truck stock program. I mean, all these things that you and I know that if you don't streamline that stuff, they get away from you. And you lose productivity because you're out on a job, and you could have had that part on your truck and made that money there, but now you got to go back. And we know that you make more money when you have the parts on the truck and you're able to make the repair than having to go back later, right? So,
Sure. Yep.
So anyway, but yet he's a great contractor, does great work, and everybody in the community loves him, and he's doing really well in spite of himself, right? But then that kickback from some of the older guys, right? And so one of the first things that I say, I look at the guys, I'm like, look, my grandma and grandpa grew up really poor. I grew up in a poor family. My dad was a sheet metal guy, but my mom she had a lot of health issues. So we grew up on that one little salary, and we had a garden because we needed it, not because my dad liked gardening, And I'm like, but you know what I find interesting is back in the day, my grandma and grandpa used a bathroom outside. And when they did get a TV, they had to get up and change the channel. And so I don't see anybody complaining about remote controls on our TVs or our power recliners or our indoor plumbing. We seem to embrace everything that makes us comfortable in technology. But what about what would make us better in our career, in our role as a technician? Do you see that same disconnect, or is it just me?
Oh no, you're 100% on point there, Huff. I mean, where I try to frame the conversation is around in many cases it's really not about them of why they need to do these types of things. Like why someone should embrace smart tools and measure quick is to do a better job for the customer, right? I truly believe that technicians in this trade actually want to do a good job. I mean, they actually want to do a good job. They want to take care of the customer. Otherwise, there's many other clock puncher jobs I could guide them to make money, right? So it does take a unique person to want to do this for a living, because there's the customer aspect of it. No customer, no business, right? Customer controls a lot of the experience of what happens every day. So I try to frame it to the point of, hey, we all have cell phones, right? How many apps do you have on your phone? And usually they have a handful of apps. And I said, okay, well, what's the problem, right? And most of the time, the problem is, why do I have to change now? Because no one told me I was doing it wrong in the first place. Okay, so I tend to change the narrative to make, like, if it was your business, if you own this business, do you feel that you're providing the highest level of value for the customer? The customer who's paying $20,000 or more of their hard-earned money to buy an air conditioning system that they didn't plan on having to buy, right? So, in understanding, you don't know everything. No one knows everything. Like, give me a 20-year tech, they don't know everything. They know what they know. They know what they've learned. And if no one's told them it was wrong, then it's, as far as they're concerned, it's right. And when you take in something like, something that does advanced diagnostics, there's a little bit of guard that's up at the time, right? Because they're like, well, man, this is a lot of data, right? Because I frame things as like total system performance, not subcooling, superheat, temp split, and charge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, how do you explain a high subcooling condition? What do you say? You have high subcooling, you need to fix it. I mean, if I'm a customer homeowner, I'm like, I don't know what that means, and you want to charge me how much for it? So, starting to build transparency and then just expanding the knowledge. I wrote a post on LinkedIn, I guess about a month ago, because I was in one of my moods, right? Because I'm sure you're following where I'm going here. Like, we get frustrated doing what you and I do. And so I called out the best way I could to say, when did we stop learning as an industry? Really? Because I do this type of training all over the country. I'm in every market. I mean, the furthest I've been recently, I was in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, wow.
Talking about this stuff. And it's the same everywhere. We all have bad duct systems. It's not a regional thing. We all are dealing with technicians with an average tenure of less than 5 years. Okay. Everyone's got the same problems. That was all of these, and I'll go sidebar here. When I was a territory manager for distributors in my past life, I felt it was one of the easiest jobs in the world. You know why? Because every contractor has the same freaking problems.
Yeah.
They can't find good help. They don't know how to price their work. They don't understand marketing very well. And I'm broad brushing that, right? But if it's equipment shortages, if it's tech shortage, if it's something, it's always something. The phone's not ringing. You could transplant me from market to market, and I can tell you we had the same conversation. It was the easiest job in the world, Huff, to walk in. If I had a remedy to treat those symptoms, I was the best territory manager out there because I had a solution, because I already knew what their problem was. You don't even have to tell me, because everyone had the same problem.
Right.
Where it changes is the consumer never wants to tell you anything. So that's the hardest part of the job. is communicating to a customer so that they can understand how to make a decision. And, it's just really interesting, getting technicians to understand the why behind these things is really the key to adoption. Because owners and managers tend to be the visionaries of the company. They tend to have, they'll buy the widget. Oh yeah, we got to do this. I can talk about callbacks and the impact that's having. Half of them don't even track callbacks, so they don't even know how much money they're actually losing in the business. But they know they have them, right?
Right.
And they go, yeah, this makes sense. We need to do this. The reports, this, that, making our technicians better. But they don't have that person to help connect the dots between the field and the office. Because, and I'll poke the bear. Many companies allow their technicians to hold them hostage. And I get frustrated with that, and I'll call an owner out and say, who owns the company? Whose name's on the building? Oh, yours? Okay. So why are they making decisions on your behalf? On how you're going to run your business that you've invested all of your money and your risk, your sleepless nights, and your 24/7 attachment to it. Why would you allow your technicians to hold you hostage? Well, it's hard to find good help. Well, I think we've solved that problem. You and I evangelize about this all the time, right?
Right.
In our own separate niche. The tools are there, the technology is there. Finally, we figured out how to solve the skilled labor issue through technology. Right? It's no different than automotive. The invention of the OBD2 in a car. It gives me data. I know what to focus on to fix it and make it run better and prove that it's actually working. Wow, what a novel idea. We're 20 some years behind. But the good news is we're here, right? So things like that, to me, when I put it in that perspective, it's hard to dispute from a technician level that doesn't make sense. Well, of course it makes sense because it's logical. And I feel like if you frame things from a logical perspective, they either make sense or they don't. So if it makes sense, then hey, guess what? Yeah, that does make sense. But why am I fighting this?
Yes, what I find interesting is like when I'm teaching the science of HVAC to like technicians. I mean, this class that we did up at last week at the MQ office, dude. I'm gonna tell you, most unique class I've ever been in my life, Brian. Because class was supposed to end at 4:30. We were out in the shop, and Joe was like, we can pick up back up here tomorrow if you want, or we can keep going. They said keep going. 6:30, we walked out of there. And then everybody went to dinner together, and it wasn't even planned. Like it was the class. I've never seen a class so involved in all my life. Matter of fact, actually, Matt from ACA,
Matt Akins, yep,
Matt Akins was there. Just a great time. But anyway, I don't know why I took that sidebar, but so like one of the things that when I was out as a tech support guy, we'd go out there and we'd measure the performance of the system, right? Because they were complaining the box was the problem. So we had to prove the box, right? And they're like, while you're doing that, I'm like, okay, so, I remember going to the hardware store with my grandpa. There was this little old hardware store, Valley Hardware, and you used to buy nails by the pound. I don't know if you remember back that far, right? When you didn't go to Home Depot and buy a box of them. You actually had these big bins, and you tell them, I want 5 pounds of those 16 penny nails. And they would measure them out with a scale. And so I know when I left there, I got my 5 pounds of 16 penny nails. And so we're installing systems, though, that we claim that perform X amount of BTUs, right? And then we have extended performance tables where we can normalize, which is what we call it, measure quick, right? It normalizes it based on the conditions to know, okay, based on this condition, this system should be producing this amount of BTUs. Right. And so as an OEM, we used to have to go out with the extended performance tables, find the condition that it's in, figure out what the actual deliverable BTUs in that condition would be, and make sure the box was working. But I'm like, but you're selling a system that you say, performs at X amount of BTUs at an X amount of efficiency, but you never measure it.
Yeah.
right? And so we've been doing that for years, even though the formulas haven't changed. Jim just harnessed the power of math and software and put it together so it does it for us, right?
Yeah.
But even to this day, I don't know if you find this, but I ask guys like, so I help also with tech support with small companies, like kind of, like a subscription kind of thing, and they'll come in like, I would tell them, say, listen, when you call, you better have this information, right? And I'm trying to, and part of it, I do that is to get them into the software. I'm like, there's a software that does this. I'm helping you along, but I'm not the long term solution, right? This is the long term solution. But up until then, they didn't have a way to measure wet bulb in the airstream. I mean, and to this day, I still say, well, my delta T is. Don't tell me what your delta T is. I want to know what your delta enthalpy is. Big difference, right? We want total cooling. Are you not dehumidifying? Now, I guess if you're out in Oregon where it's dry, right, then maybe it's a different story. But, on us East Coasters, as you are, we know that it's an issue. And so, I kind of also use that analogy. I'm like, look, if you're paying for 5 pounds of something, don't you want to know you got 5 pounds? And so, how do you prove that you did your work correctly if you're not quantifying it and showing, right, that you're meeting the efficiency and the capacities that you promised? And I think as an industry, we have been so used to not quantifying our work.
It's interesting. Like, I've had plenty of conversations with utility providers over the last few years, and I work with a lot of distributors throughout the nation, and some would say, well, it's the OEM's responsibility to make sure that these best practices are happening. And then the OEM's going to say, well, no, that's what the distributor's there for. Distributor's got to do that, right? Because the distributor's left holding the bag on the warranty side. So there is that going on. And then the utility's like, we're terrified. We don't know. We don't know who should be responsible for doing a good job, but we know, we're not sure what side to take. And then the contracting side of it is like, well, we put it in based on how we know how to put it in. And, this industry has been driven by fear and AFUE as the two key value drivers of selling, not delivered performance, not proof of performance. It's been like, oh, I just sold you 16 SEER. You know how many contractors I have terrified of actually doing a SEER and EER calculation in MeasureQuick right now? They're afraid to disappoint their customer.
Yeah.
Because they can't hide behind a bench report that was done in a lab, the ARI, HRI certified in perfect condition.
Right.
Right. But that's how we've been trained to sell. I mean, when I think back to my Lennox days, we were taught to sell certain ways based on product features, right? We had to trust that the contractor knew how to put it in. And, I was very close to my tech support team at Lennox, and I would hear the calls that they would take, especially in heating season, being in the Northeast corridor here. There was always, the first thing I would hear on gas furnace call was, did you clock the meter? What's that?
What is that? Right. Yeah.
Right. So Lennox, that's 25 years ago, almost, that I was at Lennox, 24. And our industry still doesn't know how to clock a gas meter in most markets. I've got some parts of the market, not here necessarily, but other parts of the country that do gas tune-ups, but don't do combustion testing. So again, these are safety items.
Yeah.
These are things that go boom if they're not done right, right? So we need to do a better job as an industry. I have the opportunity next week to go visit a tech school, which is amazing, so that we can talk about or introduce them to MeasureQuick and see if it's something that we can build into the curriculum, right? I think we need to start getting deeper into the education of our future technicians on, hey, this is something that's going to help you, one, learn what you're doing faster, help level you up because now you have a better understanding of the things and the theories that you've learned, and also kind of have that right in the palm of your hand, right? And so we need to start there. And we also really need to lean on these OEMs and distributors to embrace things like Measure Quick and smart tools to take responsibility of the education of our industry, because the contractors themselves aren't really seeking it out. I mean, they'll build their own programs. Some of the larger companies build their own training programs, but what are they using as their training foundation, right? Huff, I mean, that to me is where the opportunity is, but we're so far behind. Like we're just scratching the surface of being able to make an impact on that right now. What are you seeing in that right now yourself?
No, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that even some of the tech schools. Listen, I know some large companies. I know there's some folks that are doing it right. I think there's some folks that really have their heart in the right place. Some of the folks are literally, and I don't want to name them. Even one that comes to mind that I've kind of connected with, but where it's a large company, but they are taking training very seriously, and they start them out on software, right? They start them out literally with Measure Quick and a kit, and I get that, and I'm very happy about that, right? Because at least they have the right tools in their hands that's going to help them because they don't know, right? But I'm also a big advocate for teaching the science behind it, to be quite honest with you, because when they run into a DHUM problem, yes, Measure Quick is going to show them what's happening within the system, but when we have a comfort issue at that point, right, it's telling you what the system's doing. How do I address, an issue that's they got a DHUM problem where it may be oversized equipment, or maybe a building performance problem, right? So I think there needs to be a balance there. But I teach at a particular contractor in Northern Virginia, and they had a young kid that actually came there. He literally started working there and had to take off a half a day to graduate high school, right? Because he's like, we got 2 weeks doing nothing until the graduation ceremony. I want to get started, right? So his dad was also in the business, and he started the 4-year program in Northern Virginia. And the first time that, I was doing a training with them, and I broke out a psychometric chart and said, I'm going to, we're not going to learn this in 2 hours. We're going to start, and we're going to continue every session that we do until we really kind of understand it, because I want you to understand the science behind it. And he, after going through the program 4 years, still never, he said, Huff, they never did teach us psychometrics. Like, I didn't understand how the weight of air affected the system, and why in certain conditions of a 13-degree delta T on a dry bulb is actually correct. It's not 20.
Not 20.
Right.
What? It's not? It's on every checklist.
Yeah, it's right. It's a 20-degree delta T. And it's like, and seeing in Measure Quick that, he's like, I had a 13-degree delta T on the dry bulb with a green check mark. He said, I'm just chuckling to myself because I know why. But then he looked at his enthalpy delta, right? And he realizes it, and he also sees that he's got a very high humidity load in the space because it hadn't had air conditioning for a week, and it was humid. And so, but he understanding how as the air gets warmer and more humid, the air gets lighter, and it takes more of that air to make a pound, right? And so, kind of getting that science part of it, he's like, it just makes me feel better about it. And so, to me, I think we need to have a balance. I love the software, but that's why I really like teaching that class with Joe and just kind of getting into the science. I don't think we need to have them be able to go out and plot out a scenario on a psychometric chart, but I do think they need to understand the properties of air, because air conditioning is built around that, right? And anytime you ever hear Jim Bergman talk, he goes into that, really deep.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I agree with you 100%. Like that foundational piece of the science behind it is usually, like, I feel it's too early in the introductory stages of learning. This is my personal opinion, because a lot of the younger folks that are getting into the trades are there for the reason that they like working with their hands. They're not science and math whizzes.
Right.
Now
I agree with
I'm
that.
making a broad statement there, but from kids I've met, right? They like to fix things. They like to get their hands dirty. Wonderful. They may be better served learning that deeper into their um, upbringing in the industry versus early on where it's like completely flying over their head. And the reason I kind of bring that point up is I remember any of the trainings we would do at Lennox, for an example, because we did a lot of training. It'd be the same contractor sending the same guys every time. We'd get complaints that the experienced guys were bored, the young guys didn't understand half the stuff that was being covered, and then there'd be the sweet spot person in the middle who actually got value out of it. Now that's tough to do.
Oh,
No
yes.
matter
Yeah.
no matter what experience you have as a trainer or technical person, you're always trying to figure out how to pull the room together. So it's very difficult to train on advanced topics like that. And I feel personally, I've actually gotten smarter in this industry the longer I've been in it. So there's things I've learned later that have accelerated my learning curve. And so I wonder, like, if we look at training as a whole, like technical training,
Mhm.
because that's what we're talking about here, how do we provide early hands-on experience that keeps them out of trouble, and then foster that through, hey, the reason you got that reading is because of this. But the reason you got this is because of that, and we're going to train you on that this week, and the whole class is going to, the whole team's going to understand why that happens, and this is going to be our example for the week, right? Like, to me, that makes a ton of sense to train that way. I don't see it because I think we take people right out of trade school and put them in a truck in 6 to 8
Oh,
weeks or a year
yeah. Yeah.
and say, go do work. And they don't know what they don't know. And if we don't give them things to do other than 3 to 4 key measurements, they'll just do that for the rest of their career and get by.
Yeah, so while there may be a few companies that I see that are trying to do it right and they start them on the software, and I do believe building precept upon precept, right? So I do need to kind of backtrack just for a second. So like that class I was teaching psychometrics to, I'd already been teaching there like every Tuesday morning
Yeah, I get
for
it.
a year and a half, right? So, like I would start with, like, it depends on the season we're starting in, right? But typically the refrigerant circuit, like we still have we got a lot of heat pumps in this market as well. Start with that refrigerant circuit so they understand at least what superheat subcool really is measuring. And psychometrics is definitely going to come further down the road, but that's like, okay, we're going to teach, we're going to get you, we're going to teach you to understand how the equipment works, but then we're going to build on that foundation. And I think that's where we teach them how the equipment works, and then we stop, and they don't understand how to address comfort issues, right? We don't go any further. I think Jim Bergman is, well, I forget, is like, the guy's not a 20-year veteran. He's a 2-year veteran that's been doing it for 20 times over,
Yeah.
kind of thing, where, and I see a lot of that kind of, happening. But there are a lot of companies that will just do, like, they have like an 8-week program, then you're in a van, and they sell their way out of problems they can't fix.
Yeah. I mean, I think I worry that's become more the norm than the exception.
I do think it is. I think honestly, I think for this industry to grow, I do believe that young people are wanting to find a place where they can grow. They're wanting to find a place. I think that they do see the value of hands-on, and that they know that the only way they're really going to be good at something is to get to do it. Yes, you're going to have to sit in the classroom maybe for a little bit to get started. But I think there needs to be a balance of, what, we're going to get you out in the field to ride with someone, but as well as I do, you got to have the right people to mentor people, right? There's going to be always those technicians where they're just going to treat them as a gopher.
Sure.
So when I sat down with one particular company, I'm like, look, they wanted to try to develop a mentoring program also combined with classroom. Right. So where, yes, they start them with someone, but I'm like, choose that someone wisely, because otherwise they become a gopher. Because let's face it, the technician wants to get on and off the job and get home at a decent time, and letting that that young person that just started braze that joint, knowing they might either burn a hole in it, right? So we thought about, okay, what are the things we could teach in a classroom before we let them get into that van and ride along and be a helper? What are some of the things? And so brazing was one of those things, right?
Sure.
We tried to think of some of those things, and they developed a program saying, okay, these are the things we're going to teach them like week one. And then after that, they're going to be getting hands-on, right? And then one day a week, they're going to be in here learning classroom stuff, right? And so that way they're getting a balance. They're also getting some productivity out of them, right? Because they do, they help on these jobs. But the whole idea is pairing them with someone who's actually going to mentor them and not just use them as a gopher to go back and forth in the van, right?
I mean, I lived through that with some of my senior guys. Like, I'm not training the new kid.
Right.
Like, they, and part of it's, work ethic is you either have it or you don't.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really hard to build that into someone that doesn't come from that type of environment where, what do you want me to do next? What do you want me to do next? Or making decisions and asking for, forgiveness instead of permission, right?
yeah.
I'm very fortunate to raise my daughter that way, along with my wife, to like, she'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission if she knows that it's the right thing to do, and it's not going to blow you up, or set anything on fire. You're
Yeah.
just going to, you just don't know what the outcome could be if you don't take the opportunity, right? And so I think, like with training, a lot of what I see out there, it comes down to company culture, right? The company needs to breed a culture around mentorship, around training and education. If it's not there at the top, it's very hard to build from the bottom, in my opinion. And a lot of the companies that exist today were built by technicians.
Yeah.
Right. So that might not be in their wheelhouse, and that's okay. Right. There's people out there that can help to get them to that level. They don't always have to take that burden on. You can team up with people that will help you build that environment, that nurturing environment, that culture to, overcome those challenges that will continue to be there for the foreseeable future. We got over, 100,000 technicians leaving the industry every year that we're having a hard time replacing them. So yes, we do need to get them in vans quickly because, most companies, like the company I used to run, we had more maintenance agreements than technicians could possibly do the maintenances. Some would say, well, that's a good problem to have. But we were also not in a very good position technically to be able to bring on technicians fast enough that we weren't overpaying for, that looked good on paper, but had very bad attitudes. And, they had 2 years of 20 years experience, as we would say. Right. So, we could belabor on that topic all day long, but, I think the other thing that's out there that concerns me with our industry is we tend to follow the leader as contractors. And what I mean by that is we want to do a rebrand because that seems like what everyone else is doing. Or I want to use that widget, or I want to use that marketing company because that's what so-and-so is using. That doesn't mean that your business is anything like that other business. But we tend to follow, these Facebook groups and like, everyone wants to get the $20 million and sell their company. They don't care about the journey. Let's just get it to 20 million, sell it so we can get out of it and do something else.
Right.
They're not even enjoying the work. And that was a trend that was going on for years. But I think a lot of times we want to be like the other guys that look to be successful, but not understand how they got to be successful. And that still exists. And I'm sure you see that too. It's like, don't worry about what the guy out west is doing. They've
Right.
got different challenges, some similar, but some different. And they had different learnings along the way. They did it. There's no easy button. And I think as an industry, we're always looking for an easy button. I'll go back to IAQ during COVID. When I started to train contractors on, smart thermostats, again, when things got, started to pick back up again, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we sell a ton of IAQ. It was like, how much did you sell before COVID? Well, not much, only if the customer wanted it. Okay, well, how much are you selling now? Well, not much, only if the customer asks. I said, so you're a genius because the market was in chaos and uncertainty, and you just gave the customer what they were asking for. You weren't selling anything because there was an easy button there.
Yeah, the high tide raises all ships, right? I mean, it's
But 30 years in, it hasn't changed. We've always been this way. Like whenever utility rebates come out, whenever home performance rebates would come out, I remember New Jersey market. All of a sudden, everyone became a home energy auditor because you could get these big rebates for $10,000 and overcharge the customer.
Yeah.
So you make more money.
Make more money. Yep.
And take advantage of the customer. Then what happened when those rebates dried up? Nobody did home performance anymore. It's just an interesting thing. And then meanwhile, we've got tech competency at an all-time low. And, I'm seeing callbacks between 20 and 30% right now, Huff.
Oh, without a doubt.
That's a scary thing. And everyone thinks, oh, yeah, we're at 5. I'm like, no, you're not. Prove it to me.
Yeah. So I started a consulting program when I was with CE. That it was kind of what I really wanted to do on my own. But at the time, I just wasn't brave enough to go out and kind of started this consulting program. But one of the things I would do is go out and interview the service department, the service manager, the people who also, the customer service agents took the calls, that did dispatching. And one of the very first things is like, what's your protocol for callbacks? First off, do you track them? And then how do you treat them? I mean, do you send the same guy back? What's the, because what I had done when I was a contractor, I had learned to actually, I had tier levels of technicians. First off, it gave the guys something to work for, right? So I had helpers, then I had junior technicians, and then senior technicians. And you have to prove certain competencies to get up, right? And if people like, I need a raise, okay, well, this is what we need to do, and we've sent you to, we send you to trainings, we train in house, and still yet, you're putting no effort. I tell technicians all the time, if you're only learning when someone's paying you to, you're never going to be the best in this business. Because I have learned just as much at home or, reading, talking to other technicians. I can't tell you how many times we've passed books around, I mean, matter of fact, I've given away copies of like psychometrics without tears, right? And pressure without tears. And Jim Bergman turned me on the refrigeration air conditioning technology textbook years ago. And I've got about 5 iterations of that book, every time they update it. And, it's like, I don't know about you, but I'd have a unit kick my butt. And I would go home and I couldn't enjoy my evening because I had a unit do something and I couldn't figure it out. So I read everything because we didn't have Google. I would read everything I could and actually get asked, I want to go back because I think I know the issue. And I read this, I have my modern refrigeration book and all this stuff, and the old train. I don't know if you remember the old train textbook. But now people don't seem to care, right? It's hard to teach people to give a crap. But it just doesn't seem to be that out there where people are driven to kind of want to actually know and actually learn, in this industry. And so it is kind of, disheartening. But, at the same time, it's like, when I would ask them, so what's your protocol for callbacks? Do you track them? Well, no, seriously, you have software. Like even back then, I remember Windows I don't know, God, Windows XP or whatever. We had like ServiceWorks. We were able to track it. When I was a contractor, I'm like, why aren't you tracking your callbacks? These are non-billable man hours, right? I mean,
that's a whole topic that
right?
most don't understand, non-billable work
Yeah,
hours.
non-billable man hours, right? And so then, but when there is a callback, what do you do? Right? Are you sending the same guy back, or are you sending a senior technician? I mean, what's the protocol? And he didn't have one. All right, so that like problem number one right there. So the funny thing though is I also developed this 100-question test, except for the last 5 questions. So there was 95 questions I came up with, and I would leave the last 5 for the contractor, like whatever brand they're selling. Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do brand specific, like Carrier Infinity or, York Affinity or whatever you wanted it to be. Right. I'll give you 5 questions that, you help me come up with that are specific to your brand that you're selling or whatever. And, but they were not multiple choice. They were fill in the blank. And I had one contractor like, man, you need to make this test easier, because I'm like, no. You want me to gauge your text, and you want me to tell you what kind of training you need and who needs it. Giving them a 25% chance of getting the question right is not me really finding out what they know. And trust me, Brian, this test was not like exceptionally hard. So, all right, question number 1 that nobody ever got: blank is the measurement of the intensity of heat. It's in Unit 1, page 1, in the textbook. Right? And nobody could come up with temperature. Not understanding temperature is not a measure of the quantity, it's a measure of the intensity, right? So question number 1, nobody ever got, right? So
Yeah.
that's where we're at as an industry, though. And so they wanted to make it easier. To me, that's troublesome in itself, right? Let me make the test easier. And I would give them all the information they need, like, well, clock and the meter was on there, to be quite honest with you, right? We talked about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but as an OEM, how do you know your input, right? So we would have to go out when they were having problems and we'd clock the meter. We would show them how. We would teach them how in gas furnace class, and it's in the manual. The other thing is installation manuals actually, if they require it, it's in there.
Wait, aren't those just a knee pad?
No, apparently.
You throw out after you're done.
Apparently, so it's amazing. So part of me, I love the fact that there's technology now that can help, and I preach it, teach it, I evangelize for it just like you do. And I'm like, okay, we have some software that'll help us at least deliver the product correctly to the end user, and then hopefully spawn a desire. Because each one of those blocks you touch and measure quick will tell you what the target range was. Certain things will actually lead you to an article to explain how they arrived at that, right? I mean, there's so much of that kind of built in, which is why I love Measure Quick, right? And I tell people all the time, look, I don't work for Measure Quick. I don't make money as far as that's concerned. But I do provide training, and if you ask me how to make your business better, Measure Quick is going to be one of the very first things I mentioned, right? Because having proper tools, right? So the new tools are more accurate. I love the article that Jim wrote when he come back from his visit to NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and just how close the measurements of the tools that we have available to us today. That you rep them, right? The accuracy of the instruments that we have available to us today is just amazing, right? So we have all these amazing tools, and my desire is always that I hope these tools want to make you know what's behind the hood.
Well, yeah, and a lot of what I specialize in, and I think you knew this before, meeting today, is my specialty is implementation of these types of technologies, right? It's overcoming those challenges of getting it actually implemented in the company. Because putting tools on a system, that's the easiest part of the job, right? They go in 9 different places, and that's where they go, and turn the system on. Things happen. I could teach that to my 21-year-old daughter who's got 0 experience in HVAC, and I know she could do it and follow instructions in the workflow. That's the easy part. There's a lot of criticism from senior technicians, especially, that are like, "Oh, you're making the industry dumber." Like they get to skip the line. I'm like, "Hey, man, we got to get people in seats quickly because we're losing them quicker than we can get them, right? So I'm okay with an 8-week program if I'm equipping that technician with the right tools and technology to
Right.
at least be able to do meaningful work and then phone a friend, right?
Yeah.
Stream that data or learn, right? Okay, so if I had high subcooling and I realized that adjusting blower speed and cleaning an outdoor coil fixed that, I just learned something. Because the next time I run into that condition, I'm going to rule out those two things to make sure that those are correct. And if it didn't fix it, I'm learning something else new, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it is overcharged. Okay, how do I do that? Like, what does that entail? Okay, well, we help that technician get to that level. So there's a lot of there's this accelerated opportunity of learning quicker because of, you kind of hit the nail on the head, that first question of that test. The last 3 generations have been brought up in schooling based on being test takers, memorization. Doesn't mean they know it. Doesn't mean they remember it or
just
understand
regurgitate it. Yeah.
So how should we even expect them to do it in HVAC and trade school? They're just not. So the hands-on has to meet the the science at the same time, and then building a training curriculum or support program internally at a company to say, okay, you're using technology, you're getting diagnostics, you're fixing some stuff. Let's understand why this happened. And then, but everyone needs to learn it at the same time. And I think a lot of times we only train certain parts of the team instead of the whole team, which if the supporting technicians or the mentors or the senior technicians aren't understanding where the gaps are with the newer parts of the team, how do we expect to all row in the same direction, right? And the same goes for technology implementation. If I don't have the customer service team, the owners, the managers, and the technicians all rowing in the same direction, nothing gets implemented properly because if it falls apart, right? I think there's those types of opportunities are certainly out there. The fun of this industry is it hasn't changed much, but the technology has finally caught up. AI tools, digital, Bluetooth tools, CRM systems.
Oh yeah.
Communicating equipment. The OEMs are continuing to build highly complex pieces of equipment, but it's still only 15% of their mix, right? So we still sell 85% of the basics. And the basics are the stuff we mess up the most because you don't have to be certified to sell that piece of equipment. Thinking of all the A2L training that we're still doing, like it's a fire drill. Like this has been going on for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I remember offering. Yeah, I remember offering A2L classes early in, late 2023.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I need to know it. I'm like, where you been? Like,
yeah, I get calls. Can you do an A2L class? I'm like, literally, you're just now figuring out you need to be trained for this stuff. I mean, it just blows me away. But that's where, because it's, right now I don't need to know that. I'm staying in my lane, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you. You ever had an issue where? So this was more when I was at the OEM side. I mean, now the training that I book. I mean, obviously it's a different thing because they're paying more for it, right? So it tends to change their mindset. But as the OEM, a lot of times we either offer free classes or they're really inexpensive, right? I mean, $35-$40 for a 4-hour session is dirt cheap, right? And because of that, though, we're like, well, a job came in last night, so we got to
cancel.
So you're blowing off training that you desperately need for a job that you probably still could have landed that job with no problem and put that thing off for a day. I mean, there's rare occasions, but when you look at the weather, because we always teach in the shoulder season. I mean, you're telling me that's an emergency, and you're like, but you're just so worried about missing that sale that you don't get properly trained. And so honestly, that sale, you're going to kill the amount of callbacks you're going to have is going to kill whatever money you made on that job. You and I both know that, right?
100%.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's like, but that just shows that their heart's not really in that investment. The class would be nice if everything aligned, but it's not a priority.
Well, because sales fixes everything, Huff.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't hurt me yet, I'm just going to keep doing the way I've always done things because I can see my retirement in blah 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 time, right? So there's, and that's okay. That's an owner's prerogative. If they want to run their business like an ATM machine, by all means, let them do it. That's okay. You know, now whether those customers are happy at the end of the day, who knows, right? Someone's always there to provide service after the fact.
After the fact, yeah.
To me, I like to pick on our industry a lot, but only because I'm trying to move it forward, right? And not keep it stuck in the way it's always been done, because we need progress. We need to address skilled labor, as we've been talking about it this whole time. It's not going away. So, and it's a recession-proof industry.
Yeah, I don't understand why people don't get that, but yeah, I mean, even when COVID hit, we were essential.
Yeah,
we were still, most of us were still working because things were still breaking, and and we were still, while other people were closing their businesses. The coffee shops and all those people that are service related in that sense, but yet HVAC was still trucking along.
Yeah, I mean, and it's okay for folks to not move into the future of evolve. That's okay. Like I enjoy working with the people that want to take it to the next level, that want to make a better environment for their team, right? Like a lot of times in my trainings, I'll talk about on-call, right? Because when I was a GM for the company I used to run, where on-call goes when nobody answers the phone? Right to the boss.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm trying to scramble and beg and plead with any one of my techs that would actually go to the house who wasn't obligated to. Right. On call is usually a lot of times a callback that we've created.
Yeah.
So imagine if those disappeared just by doing a couple different things, that we're not fixing wrongs. We're just enhancing rights.
Yeah.
And I think that's, a lot of how we approach moving this industry forward is kind of embracing the fact that, okay, and I open this up on every training I do. What you've learned isn't wrong. I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong or it's right. It's just what you know. I'm going to show you some things that are a little different, that might look a little different than how you do it now, but I'm going to show you why it benefits you and your customer.
Yeah, it's funny. I start off a lot of my trainings with a Zig Ziglar story that I heard him tell years ago. Of course, just saying Zig Ziglar dates ourselves, right? So
I know. I saw him in a stadium in Philly.
Yeah, so, and I used to love his voice, Zig Ziglar. Yeah, it's just like, oh my God, I can just still hear it. So I loved him. But he told a story one time where he got stuck in the mud, when he was living in Texas and rain, it doesn't rain much there, but when it did, it created havoc. And he got stuck in his alleyway, and so he walked home because he was only a block and a half away from home. Next day, he calls a tow truck. And the guy comes out and he's like, hey, throw me your keys. If I can get you out without actually hooking the tow truck up, right, it'll be a lot less charge on you. You only got to pay just the fee for me to come out, and you'll save you a lot of money. And Zig Ziglar's like, who's this guy to think that he can get this car out when I couldn't get this car out? I've got advanced degrees, right? I'm a successful sales guy. I mean, this guy think he's smarter than I am. He said, but he threw him the keys because he is a sales guy. He was a people's people kind of, right? So Zig knew that an extra 5 minutes of his day was not worth to hurt this guy's feelings.
Yeah.
So he threw him the keys. The guy gets in the car, starts it up. He gets out, looks at the front wheels. He turns them a little bit, and he looks out again, rocks the car back and forth twice, and now it's out on the street. And Zig's like, he said, that was an epiphany. Was that guy smarter than I am? Or did he just have different experience? Right? And so I usually try to start that way as like, look, this is not about being smarter than anybody else, but this is about experience. And so you may, even as a 5-year tech, may run into a scenario that I haven't run into in 34 years.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't make you smarter than me, right? In my 34 years, doesn't make me smarter than you. It's just that experience, and so experience is a great teacher. And so I'm going to share, and I'd start class, I'm going to share my experience, right? And I would love to hear about yours as we go along in this subject. If you have a scenario you run into that either you figured it out and and it applies to what we're talking about, or if you didn't and you got a question about it because you still got to go back. Either way, I want you to be engaged. And I also usually ask people, if I'm in a mixed class, how many's been doing it less than 5, more than 10, just so I kind of know the room and try to tell everybody, I want to make sure everybody gets something out of this, but not everybody's going to get everything out of this, right? So, when it's just kind of those technical trainings, but kind of even back to the implementation. So you can't teach culture, right? And so I do find that the people who want a different culture are the kind of people that contact folks like you and I. And I think that's pretty exciting. And so I ended up at Rewire America kind of through just, divine providence, whatever you want to call it. It just kind of floated by me at a time where it just kind of made sense for me, even though I was busy. But this kind of floated by. They had some really good benefits, and I was actually very in need of a back surgery that I was struggling with my current health insurance because, as you know, self-employed and health insurance is not fun.
No, you live that every day.
Yeah, we had went with this Christian shared medical share program, and because it was a pre-existing and I was really having it was very seriously needed, and so Rewire hopped along, and my deal was look, I'm not going to shut my business down. I'm going to continue to consult, continue to do training. They're like, as long as it doesn't interfere with when you need to be at a meeting with us, we don't care, right? It's fine.
Yeah.
And so and it's a long process, but it ended up at Rewire as a contractor success manager, just because they know that the whole idea behind it is they want to get high efficiency heat pumps into low to middle income housing that would benefit, that would not normally be able to afford them, right? And so it's bringing special financing together and philanthropic folks. But anyway, the reason I brought all that up is because everybody had read the statistics that 60 to 90% of systems all out there have at least one detectable fault. You add airflow, it goes to 95%. And they were basically, almost everybody had this thing in their head. And I know where it came. It came from a few specific people, that all contractors are doing it wrong. Right. And so there was a young engineer that started there, actually used to work for a big OEM as a engineer in their controls division, very smart young man. He and I ended up at the symposium this past year, right? It took him to the symposium, right? We were only able to be there Friday, couldn't get there Thursday just because we were in Atlanta on Thursday. So we got there Friday, and we were sitting there, and I'm like, so what do you think? He says, I do think that there are a lot of contractors that want to do it right. He says, this has changed I kept hearing all this stuff like everybody wants to do it wrong. Nobody's doing it right. He said, and it kind of just hit me. There are people that want to do it right. And that I'm saying, as much as we need to chide the industry and get them moving in the right direction, I think that we make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that there are people that do want to do it right, that are attending the NCI summits and learning, you know what I mean? And so, and those people we definitely get behind, but we do need to bring the others along,
I mean, I think really what it comes down to is just education. We need to continue to educate the market, and we need to do it in larger numbers, right? I would love for the OEMs to please, 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 like, embrace this and truly help with educating and helping to bring the industry forward. It's you've got organizations like Grit that are really starting to get into the really young minds, and show that this is, like when we were kids growing up, firefighter, policeman, like some of those things that were really part of our youth. Now it's becoming, I want to be a heating and air conditioning tech or a plumbing technician or a welder or whatever. And that's the grassroots stuff, right? That's the stuff that's, shaping the youngest minds, but we are ignoring the current industry as it stands today, right? So I'm a firm believer we can get more done together than apart. And so, my cry for outreach or help is, that, we do have distributors that are embracing Measure Quick as an example, Huff, that have built it into their curriculum. Like our Steel out in Wisconsin, in the markets they serve, they've now built Measure Quick into their current training.
Nice.
So they've sprinkled it in to where they didn't really have to change their training much, but they figured out how to bring Measure Quick into the narrative and also demonstrate aspects of it. And then they're also building their own training around just Measure Quick specific. And I'm doing that one at a time, right? Obviously we were talking about Dave Petz earlier at Johnstone in Philly and New Jersey. He's one of our biggest advocates. He talks about Measure Quick in every training. He shows and demonstrates Measure Quick in almost every training that he does that applies to the type of training that it is. But, I just can't get there fast enough, right? We need to, continue to communicate and educate on the value of this technical competency of technicians, right? And I look at these tech support teams, and you were one of them. I mean, you can only take so many calls per day. You can only be in one location at a time, right? You can't be everywhere. So the only way to fix that is to make the phone ring less.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah.
Make the field visits less, because it all translates back into profits for the distributor and the manufacturer, where they don't have these warranty claims that are unfounded. I mean, I worked for Emerson. The people that make the scroll compressor, now it's Copeland, right? But most of those compressors that come back under warranty are not bad.
No default found.
Yeah, it's misdiagnosis.
No defect, yeah.
But someone ate that warranty claim.
Yeah.
Right? Not the contractor. Everyone else in the supply chain. And so, to me, they just accept the bleeding.
Yeah,
and that's what breeds price increases and everything else.
It's baked into the price, and the end user ends up being the one suffering.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely, because it's pass it down the lane.
Yep,
You pass it down the lane,
and they're the ones that end up hurting. Yeah,
I mean, I remember anytime price increase would come in, I'd be like, okay, 5% price increase, no problem. I'll just pass it on, right? We still have to maintain our profitability, but at this realization now, where we're at today with the refrigerant change, tariffs, equipment's the most expensive it's ever been, right? We're still putting it in sometimes wrong,
haphazardly in many cases. Yeah.
And now the expectation of like the value of that $25,000 install comes with a higher expectation because it costs more. Like as a consumer, if I bought something that's $25,000, I have a high expectation of what I'm supposed to get out of that. This should be a perfect air conditioner. Right? Like it should be flawless. I should be the most comfortable I've ever been in my lifetime. It's going to cool to whatever temperature I want it to be because I just paid a boatload of money for it. And I probably financed it because I don't have that money sitting in the bank that I want to give up at any time because there's so much uncertainty of the job market too.
Right. Yeah. So I want to hold on to my savings and just make that monthly payment. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I hear very frequently that, there's a lot of credit rejections now too. So, there's ways to make it easier to buy, but still, I run into this a lot. We, we don't, we don't man, we don't manage the value. Like we don't match value to price
Right.
as much as we should be. Because we just say, well, it's more expensive. It's just the way it is. Well, can't you do something just a little bit different to show the customer that you actually are making that more of a valuable experience to them, rather than just say, oh yeah, well, everyone's charging the same, so pick the right company. Well, how do I know what the right company is? If everyone had 5-star reviews, flashy websites, and band wraps, and everyone looks the same, who do I pick?
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's where we're at. So I do challenge the market to want to do a better job. Like you said, it comes down to those folks those that want to do a better job. Those are people I want to work with, right? Because they've got skin in the game. They want to stop the bleeding. If it's a callback issue, they want to figure out ways to better serve their customers. That they realize they've got room to improve there, right? So
Right.
that's to me is.
Yeah. So what do you think about the idea? One of the things I like to do, and I just want to kind of get your take on it, is, when I'm going and I'm trying to help a customer implement Measure Quick, is, sometimes the owner will know who this will be. Sometimes it'll be like, look, I want to see who picks up on it the fastest and who embraces it the most. And we need to make a champion. Every company, I think, needs a champion that is that one person that kind of always has that mentality going above and beyond, and really explores all that it can do, and be that one person that in that company that the others can go to. And so I like that model. What do you think about that model? Have you kind of witnessed that at
Yeah,
all?
like yeah, having that champion is always something I align with on that exact same thing too. Huff, I take that one step further. I feel that the company needs to own where they're going.
Right.
Meaning, like if I fly to Arizona and do a training for a contractor, and I'm there for a full day, right? I came in the night before, I did full day implementation training, whatever we were working on. They need to own it after I leave. Like
Yeah.
practice, make it part of every meeting. If you don't have tech meetings, start having tech meetings. Make the technicians teach the class, right? Create these champions, like you're saying, but it doesn't just magically happen. When you're trying to implement change in a company, it doesn't happen in just a seminar. It doesn't happen in a training.
Yeah.
You have to own it and hold yourself accountable for continuing to tell it, right? Now, when companies implement Measure Quick, or whether it's Measure Quick or Service Titan or House Call Pro, those are very disruptive technologies to implement in a company, because it's requiring people to do things differently than they were before that started, right?
Yeah.
All because it's all process related.
Right.
And so when you make an investment in a software platform, it is really coming down to the why. Why are we doing this in the first place? Why do I have to follow these steps? We didn't do it this way before. Well, it's because that's what we have to do. This is how we better serve our customer. And you have to continually talk about it, because now it's become part of your culture. It's become part of how you serve the customer. So, like, I hear it more common now, like even just with Measure Quick implementations, companies are saying, you're going to do Measure Quick. That's what we're investing in. If you don't want to do it, you don't work here anymore. Plain and simple. Not personal. It's the way we're going to run this business, and we're all expected to do the same thing. We'll continue to train on it. We'll continue to support it internally, but it's non-negotiable.
Right.
And that determines success versus the other. Like when I was at Service Titan, I talked to many contractors that failed at implementing Service Titan. And the reason why was because, well, we don't do it this way. Well, then why'd you buy it?
Right. Yeah.
Because you're locked into a 2-year agreement now that you can't get out of. You have to pay for it for 2 years, regardless if you use it or not.
Yeah.
Or they're only using a portion of it and they're not getting the value because, well, that's not our process. I'm like, guess what? If you have to leave your process at the door, this is the new way. This is the new way you're going to have to do things.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, that's the only really, truly successful way you can implement any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is you have to commit.
There has to be a hard stop, kind of thing, as far as I'm concerned. I am one of those folks where when I'm coaching a contractor, I'm like, look, at the end of the day, it's like, this is the way we're doing it. And you know what, if you even need help writing the process, as far as how they're going to use it, how they're going to upload a report, if you need help with that, I even help with that. But what I'll do is, like, you know what, I would give them like a 2-week grace period. Right. So I'm gonna give you a 2-week grace period. It's gonna be clunky. I get it. But but at this point here, anything after that, this is where it stops. Your grace period's here, and after that, this is the way we're doing it. And if you don't want to do it this way, then we're probably not the company you want to be at, because we want to better ourselves. We want to do better work. And unless that you can get some pencil and paper and figure out all these formulas and verify the equipment operation and capacity, if you can work it out faster, with pen and paper, or even know what the formulas are to even do it. If you think you can do it faster with pen and paper, okay, but I want the same exact readings. I want them normalized. I want everything done, and knowing they can't, because most technicians can't even tell you the formula for total heat quantity, right? They just can't do it. I just taught it way too many times. And so I'm like, this is the hard stop, because this is going to make us better. And, one of the things is, what about the simple fact of warranty, right? You mentioned warranty. When it comes back and they say, well, you got a compressor failure, right? Well, where's your startup sheets? That's what OEMs are. Where's your startup sheet? And the startup sheet would started system ran fine, or it might have some pressures on it. I'm like, when you hand them a Measure Quick report, OEMs be like, okay, right? Warranty.
There's no dispute, right?
Right. There's no dispute. I do know of a few contractors that implemented Measure Quick that actually went back to their distributor and said, hey, we've seen such a drop in our warranty claims, and we know you have seen it. So what can you do for us? Because we know that that's baked into the price. So what can you do for us if we, because the distributors have thresholds and OEM have thresholds. We all kind of know that, right? As a percentage of sales. And so they went back and actually got some rebates, right? Based on that. And what a beautiful thing. They reduced their callbacks, reduced their warranty part rate, and got some money back on the deal. They saved money all the way around. And, and it's able to do that. And so that, of course, we could talk about our love for that all day long. So I kind of want to wrap it up with this. So, right. I would like you to, and you may have to take a minute to think about what you want your answer to be. But so if you could think of maybe the top 3 ways that we could better our industry and bring them up to speed in this, right? Because you mentioned like OEM adoption, right? That would be great. Sure. What do you think would give us the biggest bang for our buck if it was Brian's world, and you say, okay, if I could do these 3 things, I know that I could have the biggest impact on the industry by doing these 3 things, or with these 3 partners, whatever the case may be. What do you think that would be?
I feel that at the distributor level, I feel there's the biggest opportunity, because they tend to own most of the liability of this entire industry right now, right? So they buy the equipment, they sell it, they put it out there to the contractors that are putting it in. providing incentives or some type of special designation for that contractor that does it the right way, and is investing in the right way of doing things. I feel that can control a lot of where our industry can go. Not make it mandatory, because I don't feel that's a realistic expectation. I don't feel that we'll have anyone do a mandatory thing, because most folks are afraid to draw a hard line. So, but providing, I think if the wholesale channel was to embrace best practices and celebrate those that do those things, I think that's a step one, right? OEMs that sell into channel themselves, aka the Lennoxes of this world, the York, the Goodman or Daikin, that still do one-step distribution. Again, the same thing, right? You want to be a top-tier dealer? You want all the best resources? I just need you to do it this way, right? Because if you do it that way, I'll give you all the best stuff in the world. I'll give you the best pricing. I'll give you the best marketing fund. I'll give you the best everything, because I can afford to, right? I know my warranty claims will be gone, right?
Yeah.
So there's that middle layer that gets us the most movement, because the distribution channel to me is the key to this entire industry shift of whether we're going to get there or not. They do hold the keys, because they are the localized training. They are the localized parts house, right? I'm seeing some movement there, but we're just scratching the surface. But to me, the other is trade school, Huff. The technical colleges, whether it's at the high school level or at the post high school level, with folks trying to enter the trades, I think we can make a huge impact there too, on providing them the best resources and training, and making it modern, right? That's one of the things that is not modern today. We're not bringing modern practices. Heck, we don't even do that in regular high school curriculum. We're still teaching stuff that's you and I learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So working with wholesale distributors and coming up with plans to help mitigate their warranties and level up technicians, actually serving the market in a way that's meaningful to everyone. The education system for the trades, that's another piece. So that's number two. And then the OEMs would be the big top one. Utilities, I could say, might be a 3.5, but they tend to be too nervous to upset the apple cart. So I find that they're not really out there to draw a hard line on what should be done to get utility rebates and programs in place, and they take forever. So to me, it's wholesalers, it's the educational system, trade schools, and then it's the OEMs, in that order. I think those are my top three wants, to continue to move the industry forward. Folks like yourself and I and Jim Bergman, like we're on our soapboxes every day, pushing and pushing and pushing. And we're starting to get some folks walking alongside us, which I think is amazing. But we're in crisis mode. Let's face it.
Yeah, we are. I would agree with that. We got such a shortage, and but at the same time, we have a way that if people will adopt it, that can help overcome that, fairly quickly and with great results. Right, and that's what I try to remind folks every day. My son is a 3-year veteran at this point. 2 of those years with Measure Quick. and he runs circles. Now he already had an electrical background, right? So when he came out of college, he actually worked for in the maintenance department of a steel plant, did a lot of electrical stuff there. So electrical like came easy to him, circuitry, reading wire diagrams. So I had to teach him the refrigerant circuit side, but got him on measure quick, and he runs circles around people and they can't understand, and he'd look at him as like callbacks are rare, and and so it's like that's he used it even where in places they don't, right? He worked for a company where they don't, but he does, right?
Sure.
And he saved every report, right? So it's like I got them all, and and they wonder how, and so that's actually helped another company to actually say, you know what, this works, right? And so how could a 3-year veteran be going to situations where a 20-year veteran, didn't yield the result they needed and had to call back? And so, the software was the one that helped pull it out, right? And so he trusts it, and that's part of the deal too, right?
Well, we need to make him internet famous on the Measure Quick YouTube page. So let's make sure we get him interviewed with Ben. Yeah. But this was a great time, Huff. I know we're wrapping up here and coming up on time. Obviously, we could have many more of these conversations that we've had, and I can't wait to meet you in person as we get closer in geography, right? So if I'm heading down your way, I'll certainly let you know.
And same here. I get up your way, and I do get up there from time to time. I got some folks who still cover that area, and I get up there to help them out from time to time. And so, definitely stay in contact. And I really do appreciate your time, Brian. You're doing great things. I see it. It's like, okay, I gotta meet this guy. I see what you're doing, and you're doing so many things, and they're all the things that need to be done, right? And so, and they also they all go like this. They all interplay, right? So everything you're doing is interconnected, and I love that. And honestly, I think it's folks like that actually get the most out of the people they help, right? It's because of what you are able to connect them to, right? In so many
I mean, my whole purpose is to give back to the industry. I mean, it does no good for me to keep everything I've learned all these years to myself.
Not at all.
If I can help folks, get a little piece of that, and it makes a big impact on them,
and it's fulfilling.
Then I'm fulfilled.
Yeah,
I'm fulfilled.
When you have that aha moment, I don't know about you, but you're teaching a class, somebody has an aha moment, or like, wow, or like when you're teaching something, like, well, that's not as hard as I thought it was going to be, and it really does give you that information, and it's like, seeing those eyes kind of light up, it's like they're like, that makes the day worth it. You might be wore out, tired. You've been, by the time you fly, get to the hotel, and you get to class the next day, you're just hoping that there's at least someone that just kind of gives you that, I'm glad I'm here kind of thing, And
actually, I just had that experience in Chicago about 3 weeks ago. That exact aha moment, and they were just, the whole team of technicians was excited. The next day, they went out and started using Measure Quick, like the immediate next day, and they were doing it with confidence. Obviously, like any technology, it's new.
You got to learn to navigate it.
Technology is not new, but using technology in a different way is new, right? So it becomes, you get this little bit of nervousness, like, oh, did I mess it up, or why is this doing that? And but yeah, that aha moment makes it all worth it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time away from home this past year, but it has been worth it. And I look forward to the upcoming next 12 months and see what impact we can make out there, and stay true to some of those topics you and I talked about today. Really is to, how do we continue to push towards those top 3 movers and drivers? I'm not stopping. It's who's going to listen.
Oh yeah, we just keep full steam ahead and bring as many along with us as we can, right? So
that's right,
man. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. I could talk. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So I'm going to. Hey folks, I
hope you enjoyed that conversation with Brian. I hope you enjoyed it half as much as I did, because I really had a great time talking to him. We could have went on for even longer, but I was under time constraints, and so we had a certain block of time to work with. But we plan on getting together again. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you take something away from it. If you ever get a chance to attend one of Brian's trainings, please do. Or he also does podcasts and things like that with ACA, and also I think with Shift Logic, if I remember correctly. So we got so much into the other stuff, we really didn't even get to showcase some of those things, other things that he's doing. So go out and check out ACA's website, and you'll see where he's involved there. And just, we need folks like Brian in the business. We need that passion. And so I hope you enjoyed it. If you could do me a favor, if you could like and subscribe, that would be helpful. But more importantly, if you could just share with other HVAC folks that might gain from listening to someone like Brian, and just help us keep passing on the word and keep the passion, right? Keep folks passionate about what we do. We love the HVAC world. Confucius said, right? I think it was Confucius. If you do something you love, then you never work a day in your life. There's been a few days in the HVAC world I felt like I worked, but a lot of them have just been, I enjoy what I do. So, and I hope that you enjoy the business as well. Take care, and we'll see you again on the next video.